And then we go to the last perspective, which is the one of the manager or mediator. I kind of like the word of mediator because I see in many of these cases that you don't really manage in this kind of very hardcore management way, that you do kind of mediate and try to get things going to the right direction, but being kind of able to adapt and change is also very vital in many of these cases. And the context in this is an art project. We actually engaged when we had the Helsinki School of Economics. We engaged to be a new patron in the Fondation de France's program. We wanted to build awareness and build identity for the town part surrounding the business schools. This is me when I was younger. There's the Helsinki School of Economics, and there is Pia, who is actually representing the Hanke, and here's the artist Martha Rosler from the States in this picture. But we started by collecting people from that area, mainly from the two business schools. I proposed this project to the school's strategic funding, and I got some funding for that. And then I got the support from the Fondation de France, mainly directed to the cost of the artist. And we started to discuss in this small group. I was a bit unhappy because it's quite small, Annukka and her friends and some others, but it includes some staff, researchers and students. So we did have kind of all aspects involved in this small group, and we discussed a lot like our identity. And our identity, there had been some studies, for example, on the values of the business students, especially in the finance, and they were really hardcore, very like succeeding in career and getting lots of money and having a good profession and, flying in the first class and having the business lounge at your usage. Things like that came up. And we kind of, as a researchers and being involved in a public institution, the universities are public institutions, wanted to kind of have more softer values presented as well, that we do provide other things as well, and our tools can be used to improve the society in a more different ways. So we came up with these different discussions. And I don't have a picture, but we have a statue in front of the business school which has 2 birds and 1 fish. And its name is, this is in Finnish, it has like double meaning. Its name is liikkeenvoitto or liikevoitto, which is like the winning movement or the business profit. The same kind of 1 letter difference, and it has 2 different meanings. So the artist himself actually had this kind of like a funny idea about this statue when he created it for the business school. But we had, luckily, at the school, an old professor who knew the artist, whose father had been an artist, and he kind of discussed with that particular artist as well as a child. So we kind of knew the stories behind that artwork. And it became like a centerpiece for our discussions, that how to change the roles that we have now, like fighting for the fish rather than sharing it, or not even fighting for the fish, but having a role for the fish as well. And then we had a mediator. Yeah. So this was the setting. We did kind of interview people in these other entities too, and there was at one time some business courses at the high school as well. And then we had the support from the official people. Maybe I think I have a picture of that. So this is the small group, us, and then in the center you have the artist, and then here you have the mediator from France, Swedish by origin. And for example, here you have the support group, the men in ties and suits. But they were really open-minded and helpful. No, the suit doesn't mean that you're close-minded. No, they were really good discussions for us. and we had a lot of support from them. And then we first came up with the idea, and I asked everybody to write down one sentence, like what is the core thing that we have in our project. And when I read it, I was kind of like, oh no, I have to stop this. That everybody had completely different perspectives and views and things like that, and I was just kind of, oh, well, what shall we do? But then I realized that, okay, this was what we wanted. We wanted to have multi-perspective, we wanted to have different aspects into it, and I just tried to cope with it, and we discussed it with the mediator and with from the foundation and with the artist. And we had lots of discussions with the artists, and we walked around the campus area and had events. We had the school's architect, he's not in the well, he's here in the back, kind of presenting all the artwork already existing in the school, which was one of the impacts that actually came out from the project, that all this art that's already there, all this architecture and design is made visible and was kind of becoming part of the discussions inside the school. We also included, went to Hanken and had people involved from the marketing and from other researchers, and had more social meetings, which I will elaborate a bit more later. But what we then looked at when we conducted interviews with the participants, we did notes from all the meetings and observed ourselves. I don't recommend it, it's very hard, but it's very good for learning as well. And then we analyzed this and started to look what kind of values and norms we had created for our activity. And one that was especially present from the student participant was this need for efficiency. That you really have to have a good agenda for a meeting. You have to kind of be in time. This is awful that people are just chit-chatting and not really concentrating. And there was this wish for achievement, that you actually have to kind of get something done, put things on the paper, have like concrete results. Then we had a value of equality, that we all need to kind of let everybody talk and everybody was listened to. I was very careful and I was very happy when the interview showed that they said that it's nice that there is no like pre-established conception and understanding that we just have to adapt. That I was very careful not to kind of voice my perspective too strongly. And then we had this different discussions, and then not kind of emphasize only the perspective of the researchers, which tends to be quite easily happening in these kind of projects. And then we have this tolerance of that we need to kind of tolerate different views and understandings and these contradictions as well. There were this kind of surprises that, for example, the Hanken felt that they were kind of strong minority, that they were not heard enough as a Swedish-speaking minority school. There were more people from the Finnish-speaking business school involved. So we kind of tried to then organize more events also at the Swedish school side and things like that. Then there was conflicts even, which is sometimes good, especially in between me and the manager, because we didn't have the same, like this is an image project. I said, no, this is not an image project. And since we were communicating mainly by email, it kind of escalated a bit. But we managed to kind of come up that this is an identity project that everybody could accept. And that was just a question of language, of different words. That for us, it was like, of course it's an image project, we're building up an image. And for her, the word image had different understanding and connotations. So we kind of, through the conflict, came up with a joint understanding that it's an identity project. Then we tried to build this sense of community, and there was this kind of, are we kind of tackling, for example, in the sentences somewhere more concentrated of the campus area as a space, as a place, and somewhere more concentrated on the community side. That this is also a community of researchers and students, and also high school students and culinary school students, and we should kind of build more community type of activity. So we had these kind of discussions a lot. And of course it could be, and it is both. They're not kind of excluding each other. And since the beginning, I think as it was art project, only people who thought that art is valuable joined. We didn't have anybody who would say that art is not valuable or art is not important or we don't really care about art. So it was a bit homogeneous group in that sense. But throughout the process, that art is influential and you can actually kind of use art became more commonly accepted. That was not like most of the people felt this, for them art was something that they went to experience in an exhibition, in museums, things like that, rather than a means of creating something else, a tool of influencing, a tool of creating identity. And that can be seen nicely in the interviews, that people really started to reflect the different roles of art. They were kind of heavy users of art, but not really this kind of, in that sense, but rather as consumers than not as like thinking how it can influence the world or the identity. And these discussions, especially by studying the earlier projects and by looking at the art, even in the visits that we walked around the school and the campus, kind of made us realize that there are these kind of different ways of looking at art. So we did kind of have these different contradictions in the values, and but on the other hand, I think it's always that we can't really have always just similar type of values, but we tend to, as human beings, be full of contradictions as well. But this is how we are, and you just have to, as a manager, kind of think where is the place of efficiency, of efficacy, and when is the place of maybe being more tolerant and allowing more free talk, and what might be the practices that actually strive for these different values to be more strongly present. So what we realized that especially the efficiency and efficacy, they were strongly present because we organized meetings. We organized meetings in the meeting rooms, we organized meetings in the classrooms, in the school premises. And that's, you have your mindset then, okay, I'm going to the meeting, I have 1 hour, I need to be efficient, I want something done, I don't want to waste my time, because everybody's busy. So we actually kind of changed the mode to have the meetings in my home. And then nobody was busy. They had time, and nobody was kind of demanding with high voice that we have to have a good agenda, and where is the agenda, and why is someone late, and things like that. But it was, we were kind of able then to discuss the topic, but in a more kind of equal and tranquil way, not all the time having in the mind that we have to achieve something, but rather that the discussion itself was achieving something. So we then, started to organize events in Hanken. Then there was the question of language, which came also out in the interviews, that most of the group was researchers, and we tend to have quite a particular way of talking all the time, especially some of us were quite using quite sophisticated words all the time. And the students were complaining that they don't even know what is talked about half the time, because it was just kind of the practice of using these different words was so common between us that we didn't realize that we should kind of try to modify our language, and maybe there was a need for some kind of interpretation at times. And then there was this art was present all the time and it was valued, but then especially after the artist came and we started to discuss her works, and we were not kind of used to talking with artists in that sense, so it was a new situation for us, and the way she explained her work and the way that she kind of engaged with us was very nice. And as a person, she was like an older middle-aged lady just normal, doing knitting work as well. So it was quite nice. And she had some experiences because she was teaching in a university in New York as well and so forth. So even though she was a world famous artist, she was quite normal person, which was nice. And we kind of found a common ground, and it found that she understood what we kind of were trying to create. And then we had this kind of sense of community, but also kind of like a sense of society in that we actually wanted to influence the image of what is business education, even at the larger scale, through this project. So what we then identified these kind of enablers and barriers for this. In this research, we have the topic of knowledge creation at the core, and then kind of like that the contradiction actually kind of enable this kind of new perspectives, new knowledge to be created, because nobody, if you all agree, you don't create something new. You just kind of continue saying that, yeah, we agree, this is what we're doing. But if you have these contradictions, kind of by discussing them and making them visible and learning from each other, you kind of make advances. And then, of course, if you have too much emphasis on efficiency, you kind of cut down the talk too early. You kind of decide too early, like this is where we should be going, rather than letting, kind of tolerating the ambiguity in the aims, which is not easy. So at the end, we actually got a very good proposal from the Martha Rosler. She proposed to create a pavilion in the park that's in the center of the business campus area, with screens that could show local artist work, screens that could show, for example, the cooks cooking in the culinary school or lectures from the halls, and then having a cafe and interactive things. And we were really happy with the proposal and started to push it towards the city. We had the support of our rectorate, and we had the kind of support of the city mayors. But the life happened. And the inhabitants around it, we organized a meeting with them, and they didn't want anything. They wanted empty space. No artwork, nothing. We don't want anything. There's enough of things already. And then the city bureaucracy was something that, even though I work daily with the city of Helsinki, that's my other job, I was not prepared to, and I didn't have the right expertise to answer their questions like what kind of wood is this, and what kind of construction will it contain, and how will it be cleaned, and all these kind of very technical things. And that's one of the lessons that I learned afterwards, that there is a time when you should actually find a second manager for the project. This was a time that I was no longer capable of doing it. It was not my expertise, and we should have found someone else to talk with the city. We did try, but we kind of didn't find the right person. And then we had maybe the major reason was that we had the change in the context, that we created Aalto University, and that Töölö was no longer like a major campus area under development, and it was Otaniemi and so forth. So it ended up in a failure in that sense, that the artwork would probably never exist. But it was a very good learning experience for all of us. And for the artist as well. I just met her, and she has good memories, although quite different kinds that I have from the whole project. But what time is it?
Plenty of time.
Okay, so now we have time. I have the concepts here, but I will not go through them, but I will go through the different types of mediating that can be identified from the literature. And you have this kind of ideas that what is actually to be a mediator or in between, a manager in these kind of settings. So you can be there's a lot of discussions about being mediator between different national contexts, to understand the cultural differences between different national cultures. That can also be interpreted, as in many of these, as being able to understand the different cultures between different types of communities or fields, like the field of art or the field of higher education, or the field of the inhabitants in Töölö, living in a town part, different ways, and how then to discuss with them. And you can kind of introduce the elements in between, or you can kind of try to build a joint ground. So you have these different fields, and then you can either kind of like just visit here, or you can try to build a common ground somewhere here that is a bit more kind of like a permanent. It's kind of like what we call midfield, and then create your own values and norms for that, adapting, because each of these have their values and norms and practices. And you can try to create something that kind of joins them all. This can be very silly things. Like, for example, the artist was not used to having meetings before 11 o'clock, and the city officials were used to having the meetings at 8 or latest at 9. So I actually have to walk to her apartment to wake her up to get her to the meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning. Because she was, she had jet lag, but still kind of like, that was not in her mindset that why do people have meetings this early, this is not human. So you have to kind of think these different things and how to create this midfield. You might have to be a translator, like in the example of the conflict, that try to find what does these words mean and how can we use words so that people have at least somewhat common understanding of what we're talking about. And then you can also be very activist in that you try to actively create this kind of midfield, create contacts, and kind of push it forward. Or sometimes you can just think that it is this kind of invisible hands, that there are these structures. And for example, the role of the supervising board in our case, I think, was a bit like this, that they made it possible by funding us and by accepting the project. But they didn't actually kind of engage in this dialogue a little bit, but having this kind of support at the back, having these structures that support this kind of activity is important as well.